in for a moment as we let people arrive, okay? So again, just letting the sound draw us into meditation by letting the sound draw us into it. Good, thank you. I'm going to lead some meditation and then do some question and answer from questions that some of you sent in by email. And tonight, the meditation I'm going to lead will combine the two meditations that we've been learning. So I'll lead central parts of the two meditations, the field of care meditation first, and then right from within that field of care, then we will enter into the compassionate presence to feelings meditation, right from within the prior one, okay? In order to show how closely connected these two meditations are, and to let each help the other meditation, help empower each other. So let's start with field of care first, establishing that and settling into that. Again, the purpose of that is not to ruminate about the field of care, whether it's good enough or not or anything. The purpose is to find something that works to help us begin with pretty immediately to start to experience what I'm calling loving qualities, like qualities of warmth, acceptance, connection, care, perhaps some joy, the kinds of qualities that many of you named earlier with the field of care meditation. Once we begin to experience those qualities from our underlying awareness, we just drink them in. All of our attention goes to that. We don't worry about field of care if it's perfect enough people or whatever. That's not our interest. It's these loving qualities. Learning how to steepen them, access them, and steepen them more and more. And let whatever comes up just be embraced in them, in the spacious care and acceptance of those loving qualities. Anything, everything that comes up. That's a real learning. So just begin with a little abdominal breathing. This time, just breathing in your own natural rhythm, your usual way of breathing, but except for breathing into the abdomen, so you feel your abdomen expand with each breath. You let the feeling of the abdomen expanding and contracting with each breath just draw you into it more and more. Just like letting the sound of the gong draw us in. Letting the feeling of the abdomen expanding and contracting just draw you into it. And now bring to mind your field of care. So that may be a caring moment that makes you happy the moment you remember it, or it could be a benefactor that's inspiring to you, or a spiritual figure that's deeply meaningful to you. But experience that field of care as if it is with you here now, or it is happening now. It is not just a memory. Feel it. You are being seen in your deep worth and dignity, beyond all superficial judgments, with deep care and compassion. You are being seen. And you can just relax into the feeling of that being seen and held in care. And just steep in its loving energy. Feel its tender qualities. And let them infuse your whole being. Just relaxing into it, accepting it. Every part of you loved in its very being. And now I'll add a little instruction from compassionate presence to feelings. So still just relaxing, steeping in this loving energy and its tender qualities. Let any feeling related to this pandemic crisis also be here. And become aware of that feeling within you in a spacious way. Within this spacious field of loving energy and warmth and acceptance. Just letting any feelings that are here, fully allowing them to be here. Without trying to do anything to them or about them at all. Like a friend quietly present to a friend. Letting any feeling that's here have all the space it needs to find its own place and settle in its own way. Any feeling that you notice. Just letting it have all the space it needs to find its own place or settle in its own way. Even as you continue to be held within this field of care. Letting every feeling be held in it too, spaciously. And if your mind starts thinking about various things, then notice the feeling associated with those thoughts. Notice the feeling and become present to that feeling in the same spacious deeply allowing way. Just fully allowing everything to find its own place in its own way. And if part of you is having difficulty with this practice, then notice the feeling within that part of you. That feeling of whatever it is, not liking or worried or whatever it is. Notice the feeling and become compassionately aware of that feeling in the same way, letting it have all the space it needs to find its own place. Just resting spaciously like this, with or within the feeling. And letting everything just settle in its own way. And as this practice deepens, you may find your mind resting right in the essence or core of a feeling. That feeling may just open by itself into a space of deep warmth and calm and peace from within it. And if that happens, just relax deeply into that and just let everything be. Okay, thank you. So what we did was we started with the meditation to establish the field of care and to settle into its loving energy and tender qualities, or to steep in those. And then right from there, we entered into some of the instruction for compassionate presence to feelings by paying particular attention to any feeling that was here, maybe a feeling related to the pandemic, emotional feeling in this case. And then learned through that instruction, it's a process of learning, how to be with feelings in a totally accepting, allowing, spacious way. which is not usually for many of us how we are used to being with our feelings. For many of us, we're used to avoiding painful feelings, especially trying to suppress them or distract ourselves from them, or maybe even act them out if we're angry or frustrated, with a sense of just trying to get rid of them quickly by acting them out. But for the most part, we have not been taught how to be with feelings this way. And this is a very different way to be with feelings. So I led these two meditations together, sort of the heart of the field of care meditation, which is receptive mode, and the heart of the compassionate presence to feelings meditation. The first one is meditation number 2 in your handout. The second one is meditation number 4 in your handout, compassionate presence to feelings. And I led them one into the other to show how closely connected they are. So the field of care meditation provides a space of deep acceptance and warmth and care in which to let all parts of ourselves and all feelings process themselves in a deeply healing way. And then in the compassionate presence to feelings meditation, we connect with that same space of deep acceptance and warmth in an even more immediate and direct way. Now, for many people that I've worked with these meditations, for many people, doing lots of the field of care meditation, doing that a lot, familiarizing with it, repeatedly reconnecting with it, even for brief moments in your days, doing that a lot, field of care meditation establishes the space of inner safety and acceptance that's needed to do the compassionate presence to feelings meditation well. For many, it works that way. We practice field of care meditation quite a lot, and it familiarizes us with our capacity to actually be present to any feeling at any moment in a profoundly spacious, allowing, compassionate way, which can then just be a direct being present in that way to any feeling that we're experiencing in our day. So for many people, that's how the training unfolds. Are you following me? From doing a lot of compassion, from doing a lot of field of care meditation, and then from that, we have the basis to do compassion presence to feelings more easily. For some people, this would be a smaller number in my experience, but for some people, compassionate presence to feelings meditation itself is more immediately connecting and engaging for them. For some people, they relate right to that. Somehow it speaks to something in them. And even more than the compassion, than the field of care meditation. So for some people, it works that way. So the different meditations that I'm introducing from the sustainable compassion training kind of model that I draw from actually can unfold in different ways for different individuals, depending on which one of them is most connecting for you, for each individual. Which one is most connecting, makes sense to you? Which one can you really engage pretty well, even upon being introduced to it? And then that one becomes your touchstone, which is the touchstone or doorway into the other meditations, which each then help further empower and inform each other. Is that sort of clear? So that's why I led both of these kind of together tonight, or show how one can flow into the other, to show how closely connected those two meditations are, and how each can actually prepare more for the other. But that's also an example of how all these meditations that I'm introducing work. Each one can actually prepare for each of the other ones. So you see which one is most connecting for you. And then you can do that one a lot, and then notice how it helps open the door into others. Okay, so There are questions that were sent in tonight, sent in this morning, by email. And so I have a bunch of them. So I'm going to go ahead and respond to some questions, okay? Shall I do that? Okay, so here's a question. My issue during this pandemic is a lack of focus. So are you all hearing me okay? You can nod if you're hearing me. Okay, just need to make sure the connections are here. So during this pandemic, my main issue is a lack of focus and confusion and fragmented energy. It's not a distinct, clear feeling of fear or worry or something like that in the list I was giving. Just fragments of unfocused thought and energy. So when I am in one of these meditations and my mind goes off into those fragmented ways and I realize it, do I embrace that and love that and accept that sense of fragmentation as I would with a distinct fear or distinct unpleasant emotion? So yeah, so my answer is yes, yeah, that's right. That's another kind of feeling, that feeling of fragmentation. So fine, that's a feeling. So exactly, you do the exact same thing with that as with all other kinds of feelings. Here comes another question. If I do not have a large, obvious emotional feeling that I'm experiencing, do I search for more subtle feelings that I may be experiencing? Did you hear that? Okay, so if I don't have an obvious, strong emotion that I'm experiencing, do I search for more subtle feelings that I may be experiencing, more subtle emotional feelings? And the answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, if you look at the instruction, I mean, you don't have to right now, but when you have time, look at the instruction in Meditation 4, Compassionate Presence to Feelings. And here's part of the instruction at the beginning of it. I'll read it to you so you don't have to look if you don't have it right there. The instruction actually says, first we start with physical sensations or feelings, then we move on to emotional feelings that we're feeling from within the body. And the instruction is written to say, sense whatever emotional feeling is present within you from within your body. At first, you may think you are not feeling anything, but often you can become aware of a subtle emotional feeling that was not fully conscious to you, such as a little anxiety or worry, or liking or disliking a little bit how things are. You notice that? I could put that to you right now. Can you notice a feeling of kind of liking or disliking a little bit how things are right now or how they feel to you? So that sense of liking or disliking a little bit is almost always something like that kind of feeling is here. It's just a matter of noticing it. Or there might be a sense of just trying to hold on to things. Do you notice that? Trying to just hold on to things or have things be a certain way. We're just trying to hold on in here. Can you notice a feeling like that? That's often there, I think, that kind of feeling. We're holding on to our frames of reference, our sense of control, our sense of safety. There's a subtle level, almost continuously, I think, of just trying to hold on a little bit of gripping or grasping. We can notice that if we pay fresh attention. And those are quite subtle feelings that are not usually conscious to us. Or you might feel a stronger emotion like fear, frustration, or joy. Or, and this is important, you may just feel numb, such that you may say, I don't feel anything at all. So let's call that a feeling of numbness. Okay? So now you have a feeling. It's numbness. Now be present to that in this way. Okay? That's how this works. It really works that way. That means we always have something we can practice with because we're always feeling. even when it seems to us like we're not feeling anything, that itself is a feeling. Feeling kind of numb. Feeling like I don't feel anything. Then even better, I might worry about that, but I'm supposed to be feeling something to do this practice. Now I'm worried. That's another feeling. It's just a matter of noticing. We're always feeling. Okay, here comes another question. How important is it to do these practices with your eyes open? So I like to encourage us to do all these practices with our eyes open if we can. That's encouraging, it's not demanding. If we can do it with eyes open, that's best because it's more integrative. What do I mean? Doing these practices, like let's take compassionate presence to feelings, for example. The reason to learn it is not mainly to learn how to be very skilled on a meditation cushion. Actually, I could care less about how skilled we are on a cushion somewhere in our house or something. To me, that's almost meaningless. The reason to learn it, I mean, first we do have to learn it on our cushion or our seat, but the reason for learning it is not to be very adept somewhere in a corner of our house at doing that. Who cares about that? The reason is that we can become so familiar with it that right in the midst of our days, we can connect with it. And typically, our eyes are open in our day. Typically, when I am with others or working with others, or just in my day, my eyes are open, aren't they? Aren't yours? So if we do not learn how to do these practices with our eyes open, we don't know how to bring them into our day. And that's when that's actually the primary purpose of learning them on our meditation cushion. That's the reason. For that reason, I do encourage trying to explore doing the meditations with eyes open. However, having said that, I know that can be difficult at first because many of us were introduced to meditation with the instruction to close our eyes or just assume that we should. And so we're used to that. So it can seem odd at first to have our eyes open. I understand that. And so, of course, you can close your eyes if that feels more comfortable to you at first. But I would ask you then to experiment sometimes with doing the practice with your eyes open. I would ask that of you, because that opens the door to the possibility of finding yourself in the spirit of the practice right in the middle of your day when your eyes are open. Like right now, you seem to be looking at me. I'm looking at you. Our eyes are open. Could it be possible that one or a few of us might actually be also compassionately, spaciously aware of our feelings while we're looking at each other? Could that be possible? And how could we do that if we insisted that we have to close our eyes to do that practice? Anyhow, that's my orientation toward all that, okay? You have your freedom, but that's my reasonings. Okay, another question. John, could you speak to developing the awareness of this loving field of care outside of formal practice sessions? Kind of like how I was just speaking. When we are out and about and a feeling or thought arises, for example, some strong anxiety or jealousy, there often isn't time to just pause and then bring in a caring field. So how are we to practice with the caring field in our ordinary day and with feelings or strong feelings when they come up? So that's a good question, right? Seems good to me. So what should I say? This is how I think it works best. Do the meditation that's most foundational for you out of this set of meditations that I am introducing. For most people that I've worked with, that is field of care meditation. Not everyone, but for most people. So if that's the case for you, then you would do the field of care type of meditation. It's meditation 2 in your handout. We have audios of them as well and here on these recordings. And you would do it first thing in the morning, if at all possible. I'd say actually it has to be possible, you have to do it. Sorry. And however much time you have for that. You know, typically if you're a school teacher, a social worker, a nurse, a doctor, whatever, you're really busy and you've really got to get going. I understand that, but can you do this meditation for maybe 15 minutes? No, I can't possibly. I'm a school teacher. I've got to get going. Okay, can you do it for 10 minutes? I bet you can. I bet you can make 10 minutes to do it in. But then someone might say, no, that's still too much. Okay, but can you do it for 5 minutes? Then I'm going to draw the line there. I bet you can find 5 minutes. And if you do it every morning, at least for a little while, 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, at least 5 minutes, you keep familiarizing with it. It becomes more familiar. And then that sets up your day. So then during your day, this is the key thing. Repeatedly during your day in little moments, maybe for even just 2 minutes at a time, 1 minute, 30 seconds, you reconnect with that meditation. So it is threaded through your day in many little moments. And that's what can start to change our brain, basically. It requires repetition. That's what can begin. It can begin to start to feel like it makes sense inside to reconnect with that way of being, because it's starting to strengthen certain neural pathways that correspond to that way of being. But that requires repetition. And that's the way it can begin to unfold. So then if you do that, then when something upsets you, something turns over your apple cart, now you're upset. Not that any of you ever get upset, but I'm just hypothetically. Closer and closer to the time of getting upset, you're going to be able to reconnect with that practice and experience your upset feelings as embraced in that space of deep acceptance and warmth and compassion. Closer and closer to the time, you'll remember that you can click into that through repetition. You'll get closer and closer to the time. Maybe it used to take you a week ruminating about how horrible everything is. Then it becomes only 5 days, then only 2 days, then only 1 day, then only an hour, then only a half an hour, then only 5 minutes after you're upset, before you realize that those upset feelings can be embraced in this spacious, compassionate way. Then only 30 seconds, then only 10 seconds, then closer and closer to the time. And eventually it can come to a point, as it's taught in Tibetan practice traditions, that something that upsets you, by causing that feeling of upset itself, is your great ally for the path of awakening. Because it's raising to consciousness parts of oneself and habits of reaction that otherwise would remain unconscious. And now you have a practice within which all those feelings of upset can be embraced in a spacious, compassionate way that allows them to relax, unwind in their own time. No rush. And begin to self-heal in a deep way. And reveal that there's much more here than the images of my upset feeling. So anyhow, that's the direction. It's a great question for how our ordinary upset feelings during the day can be brought into practice more and more. How that actually works. Here's another question. Someone asks, I have some trouble holding on to the loving feeling throughout the meditation, especially when I do it at home. To address that, I start saying a kind of a mantra. I am loved. I am seen. I am heard. And repeating that, and that's inspired actually by the caring moment or the benefactor, that sense of things. But then I repeat it in words to myself like a mantra. And this helps me stay focused and brings out that sense of a field of care for me. Is that okay? Or would it be better to try to just hold on to the loving feelings? Except that she or he said at the start, I have trouble holding on to the loving feelings. So my response to that is, if, let's say your field of care is involves a caring moment, a moment of caring connection. If that caring moment really makes you happy to remember it, or feels uplifting or inspiring to remember it, then that the loving quality is already there. Just upon remembering it, there's already a kind of an uplifting quality because it makes you happy to remember it. And that's why my criteria for selecting a caring moment is that it makes you happy to recall or feels positive to remember. There's a feeling to it upon remembering it. That's important. But then if you re-inhabit that caring moment and follow the meditation instruction, more and more of the felt sense of that kind of field of care can emerge. More and more of the feeling of it can emerge and unfold. Every part of you loved in its very being. You are seen in your deep worth and held in deep care. So as we follow the meditation instruction, as I mentioned the first night when I introduced that, when we follow the instruction of the meditation, the process we are entered into is purifying what we experience in a caring moment into greater and greater unconditionality, more and more unconditional, total, full. Every part of you loved in its very being. So we take the caring moment and the fact that it feels uplifting or happy to think of it or recall it. And then we let that feeling open a doorway to experience more and more of the feelings related to that from our underlying awareness, and purify all of it through the instruction to greater and greater unconditionality. So if you do that, then you won't really need to hold on to the loving feeling. That's not exactly what's going on. You just keep following the instruction and let that start with whatever loving feeling you started with, and let it help open the door into further and further underlying qualities that are available to you in your underlying awareness. And if that sense of the field of care begins to get stale, then you can just, during the meditation, freshly recall the field of care. So you're not trying to hold on to the feelings. Just if things get stale or uptight, then just, you can take a break or relax for a moment and then freshly recall that your caring moment and just let its loving power draw you back into it. It's happening now. Now, having said all that, if also saying a kind of a mantra to yourself, I am being seen. If that helps you further access those underlying loving qualities, that's fine. So then another person asks, sometimes I can recall a caring situation, but can't bring to mind the emotional content. For example, sitting beside my mother on a beach when I was very young, but I have no felt sense of that. I just remember it, kind of like just cognitively, let's say. So my response to that is, again, what we need to do is try to find one simple caring moment. And I do really believe, I mean, from all the people I've worked with over a lot of years, and everybody I hear from also in psychology and so forth, I really do believe we've all had thousands and thousands of the kinds of moments I'm talking about. It's just a simple little moment when someone was happy to be with us and we could feel that, and we were happy to be with them. We've had thousands of little moments like that, often even with strangers. They're not a big deal, all over the place. But because of our attachment scripts, as I said, I think the second week, we may be in the habit of ignoring many of them, not noticing them, not being inclined to acknowledge that there's a signal of care coming toward us. Because of our attachment scripts, of course, that could be the case, but that means we just need to look a little bit more, spend more time on it. And what are we looking for? We're looking for one simple moment of caring connection that genuinely makes you happy to think of. Upon remembering it, you're happy to think of that moment with that person or that being. You can do that. If you don't feel like you've got it yet, keep looking. You'll find them. You might find them earlier today. If there's a father in your family cracking jokes, you know, like a dad joke or something, that could be a caring moment if you're just willing to acknowledge it. Okay, I'm sort of like lobbying for dad joke people. What that means is that you already have, the questioner was asking, I can think of a moment like that, but there's no emotional content. No, if you think of a moment like that and it makes you happy to think of it, you already have some of the emotional content. It's already there. Notice it. And then let that begin to take you into the full, as you follow the instruction, now just let yourself experience it like it's happening now, like you are there. That could be a rich experience, feeling what it's like to be there, remembering how it looked or felt or sensed. It's happening now. And you have what you need. So my friend, so here's another question. My friend finds it challenging to feel into her body due to a psychological condition, a little bit of PTSD from earlier in her life. So how would you suggest that she take up the compassionate presence to feeling meditation, you know, which begins with sensations in the body and then moves on to emotional feelings that we feel within? Should she hold that lack of feeling and care? So in other words, she cannot feel into her body. So should she hold that lack of feeling and care? The questioner asks it that way. And that's a brilliant way to ask the question, because yes, I would say yes, absolutely. Hold that lack of feeling and care, just like that. Just as instructed. So these 4 principles to the compassionate presence meditation. Notice the feeling. So here, that feeling is what a lack of feeling feels like. What a lack of feeling feels like. Are you following me? Don't get hung up on the word feeling like it's supposed to mean something other than what you are experiencing. What you're experiencing, if you call that a lack of feeling, that's the feeling then. What you would call a lack of feeling, let that be the feeling. Okay? Someone might say, oh, I just feel numb. Let that feeling of numbness be the feeling. And then we follow the 4 principles. Notice that feeling here, what that lack of feeling feels like. Perhaps it's just a sort of numbness. Fine, fine. Don't expect anything else. Nothing else needs to be here. We'll call that the feeling, that sense of numbness. Now deeply allow it. That's the 2nd principle. Let that feeling of numbness have all the space it needs to find its own way of being. The 3rd principle, just rest with that or within that feeling of numbness. Fine. And the 4th principle, just let everything be. Letting that feeling of numbness have all the space it needs to find its own way of being here. And just let things be. Then things can begin to settle in their own way and open more and more into their depth, in their own time, in their own way. The basic openness and warmth hidden within the feeling, even within the numbness. But I don't want to say that much about it, or there's a tendency to just grasp to that. I want to get my feeling to really open into some deep dimension of it or something. So better not to talk about that much. But what can happen gradually is feelings in their own time can begin to open into their deep nature, which is a nature of basic openness and warmth and profound well-being from within the very essence of the feeling. But we don't get to that by trying to get to that. That's not part of the instruction. The feelings themselves can settle that deeply when we learn how to let them. And so the instruction involves learning how to let the feelings, how to allow the feelings to find their own way of being. And as they do, then they naturally settle very deeply. Then eventually they can even open into that nature of openness and warmth and profound well-being from within the feeling. Even what was first felt like a bad feeling, even that, any feeling. And that's coming from a part of Tibetan Buddhism that I'm drawing from, Nyingma Dzogchen. Okay, so here comes another question. Are you ready? I find that I can best connect and evoke a sense of a field of care mainly by thinking of inanimate objects, like a rock I saw during my beach walk, or the art that a mother and her daughter created at the beach, or an image from the Tao Te Ching or something like that, or I Ching. But I don't connect to it as well by thinking of a caring moment with a person or a benefactor. Please comment. Okay, so I should comment. So that's fine. That's a place to begin. And that's another kind of caring moment, would be like a moment in nature. For you, it's certain objects somehow are connecting for you in a way that brings some kind of a feeling of deep okayness or deep well-being. And for many people, it's a moment in nature, that's special to you, somewhere in nature that's very special and profoundly grounding, where you feel deeply well and safe, and perhaps inconceivably all is well, even though another part of you feels like many things are not well, and yet in that place in nature for you, there may be a background sense that somehow everything is profoundly well, profoundly okay. Like overlooking the ocean, or sitting on a mountainside at sunset, or things like that. And that's a wonderful place to begin the field of care meditation. But in addition, I do want to encourage all people to also, over time then, that's a wonderful starting point, but over time, it's also, I think, very good to continue to sift through your experience and be open to the possibility, remembering about attachment scripts that I taught about in our second Thursday session. We come out of our childhood with a kind of an internal model and a way that we tend to talk to ourselves about no one really cares about me, or why do they take such good care of her, but they're not paying attention to me? No one really cares about me, or people don't really care, they just pretend to care, or no one is really caring, or all kinds of things. These are very, very typical, by the way. I mean, maybe you recognize it. Or I'm just not lovable. We come out of our childhood, many of us, I would say all of us, with something like that, an internal kind of script that we keep talking to ourselves about. And therefore we don't notice probably most of the caring moments of caring signals are edited out. And it's also not part of our education to notice things like that, as if they were moments of people expressing care, embodying care, happy to be with you, taking joy in you, willing to really listen for a moment. We're not really educated to notice how incredibly important any such moment is, because it's a moment of connection to underlying powers of love, connection, compassion, warmth, resonance, responsiveness, discernment, courage, recognition in the other person, in yourself. It's a moment, it's like a window into more of the depth of our being. That's not usually part of our educational system. You know, it's important to learn math and science and English and on and on. Those are important. And in addition, it's incredibly important to notice every caring moment. That's not usually been the in addition part, hasn't been said. So of course that's not familiar to many of us. But so therefore I really encourage everyone, even if nature or an inanimate thing is your connecting point for field of care meditation, keep looking also, because keep looking for moments of caring connection with other sentient beings, humans, animals, and so forth. Because it's important to experience what it's like to be seen and held in care, in order to empower us to see others and hold them in care. Just as it's important to see others in their worth and dignity and hold them in care, to empower the possibility that we could also be receptive to that. We could allow that, we could acknowledge that, we could let others exercise their caring capacities. We could give that to them, we could make that an offering to others, to be willing to accept their caring capacities, to accept their ability to see me and not deny it or push it away. So both the subject and the object of care, we need to experience both in order to empower and bring out more of our capacity and help us settle into the source of that capacity and the depth of our awareness. So I do encourage, keep looking. Don't just declare, all I can do is think of nature, which is wonderful, but I will never think of a caring moment. Don't leave it at that. Keep looking. You can do that gently. You can take your time with it. There's no rush. There's no pushing. But keep doing that. I'm not going to let us get away with avoiding that. And a few other things come to mind. Well, one thing is, one person asked, the language of parts, John, that you used, parts of us, some part of us may come up that wants to think of other things, or some part of us comes up that is cynical about caring moments. No caring moment is good enough. That is, by part, some sense of self is coming up with that train of thought and feeling. So John, when you use the language of parts, it seems related to internal family systems teaching, which uses that language. Could you comment on that? And yeah, I do draw on internal family systems language when I use parts language. And that's actually noted in the handout after meditation 2. If you look, you'll see that acknowledgement that the language I'm using there of parts is actually drawn from internal family systems that was developed by Dick Schwartz. But I also, in this teaching, adapted also from Tibetan Buddhism and other spiritual traditions, the basic pattern of it. I also want to focus equally on feelings too. So if the focus is only on parts of us, that is, this or that sense of self that we are experiencing, we may not notice enough the feelings that are coming up with it, which really need our attention in the ways that we're learning. And if we focus only on the feeling of the moment, we may not notice that it is associated with a sense of self that is a part of us. that also needs a space of acceptance and assurance and compassion. So I like to use both the term parts and the term feelings and keep pointing our attention toward both. And by part, I mean a sense of self, which is a pattern of thought and feeling and reaction, which comes often is also carried on from our childhood in the ways that it is reacting to things. And just also, as it happens, I'm going to be co-teaching a day-long workshop with Dick Schwartz, the developer of Internal Family Systems, on May 2nd. And if you're interested in that, you can find that on the site of my organization, Foundation for Active Compassion, which is on the first page of your handout. If you go to that website, Foundation for Active Compassion, you'll see that on the events calendar. So yeah, Dick Schwartz and I are in dialogue. So there's another kind of a set of questions about, my mind seems to waver between different caring moments, or when I think of a benefactor, then sometimes my mind may waver between different benefactors. Which do I choose? And all that is great. We need to explore, recall various caring moments, see which ones are most effective for accessing the loving qualities, or try to bring to mind a benefactor and see how that works in the meditation to help us access the loving qualities, actually begin to experience them and follow the instruction to let them seep thoroughly into our whole body and mind, into all of our feelings. What works best for that? And then we can settle on one or a few of those that we come back to again and again, one benefactor or one caring moment. Or we may have a few that we just find really engaging and like to keep revisiting, and that's fine. Okay, here's one more that's kind of important. This one is, says, I'm a therapist, psychotherapist, and I work with people with significant trauma, PTSD, and dissociative disorders. And in that context, I've always been instructed to titrate exposure to feelings. That is, we're not meant to be in our difficult feelings all the time. So being with them has to be done carefully. It's a growing skill. And if emotions come in rapid succession with the feeling that there's not enough space for them, then that's not helpful. So what are your thoughts on that, John? So did everybody hear the question? That's important. So she's working with people, she or he is working with people with significant symptoms of trauma. So for people with strong symptoms of trauma, the kinds of meditations that we're doing, which are practices for becoming aware of feelings safely, those practices may not be advisable for someone who has strong symptoms of trauma. It depends on the individual, but they may not be advisable because their inner capacity to establish a safe space for their feelings may not be available right now. Are you clear? I mean, you're following what I'm saying? So this is not just a practice to be rammed down anybody's throat. If someone has strong symptoms of trauma, it may very well be better not to be assuming that these are the practices to be doing, because there are ways of establishing a safe space for our feelings, but people with strong symptoms of trauma may not at this point have the inner capacity to establish that safe space, just may not be available to them right now. So in that case, it's often better to work with a psychotherapist, and that psychotherapist may, if they're familiar with kinds of meditation, may at some point choose to draw a little at a time on a relevant meditation as appropriate for that person in therapy. And that's something for that psychotherapist and that patient to work out in just the way that the questioner asked that question. Would need to be titrated, need to be careful, need to really take your time, need to ask the question if a meditation practice is appropriate at all. It may not be. Now, having said all that, What about people who do not have strong symptoms of trauma? But we've all experienced some trauma in our lives. But if during any meditation, anyone feels that their emotions are cascading without the ability to connect with a safe inner space of acceptance and compassion for those feelings, so their emotions just start cascading and they're caught and they can't get out. Anyone at any time who feels that happening during one of the meditations should just stop the meditation and do something else for a while. Take a walk, do some yoga, sing a song, play a musical instrument, do some art, live. And then see if you can reconnect with the meditation at a later time in a way that is more internally safe. See, test it out. But there's no need to push this at all. And also, it's important to see which of any of these meditations is best for establishing that safe inner space, the safe inner space for our feelings that each of the meditations I'm introducing can provide. See for yourself as an individual, which, if any of these meditations, is best for establishing that kind of a safe inner space for your feelings. And then do that one as the basis for any other of the meditations. So as I said, for many people, or most, that has typically been the field of care meditation, was the one that helps, once familiar with it through a lot of repetition in the way I described, it starts to establish a kind of a safe inner core from which each of the other meditations make more and more sense and become easier to enter into, including compassionate presence to feelings. But for some people, compassionate presence to feelings is the first one that's really engaging and makes deep sense to them. And for others, it'll be one of the other meditations that I'll introduce in coming weeks. Maybe the one that's your foundational one. Okay? So I think that's all that we have time for today. We got through most of them, but not all. My apology for that. And I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Okay? Meanwhile, I hope you're be well. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.